Welcome back to Boilers in the Stands. I'm your host, Joe Jackson. Alongside me, as always, is my co-host, Kraig Bowers. It's February. There's, I believe, we're 5 weeks from today that we're recording this Selection Sunday, which means 4 weeks from today, Big Ten champion will be decided. So we are here just to kind of talk through what's going to happen down the stretch. There are 3 teams with 2 Big Ten losses, 2 teams with 4, Maryland with 5, and then I would say the rest from there have really no chance probably to win any sort of Big Ten title, and even Maryland's a bit of a stretch. But yeah, we're just going to kind of talk through schedules and just what needs to happen for Purdue to put up another Big Ten banner. So I'll throw it to you, Kraig, and just kind of let you go.
Yeah, and I think, it's real interesting because we go through the Big Ten season up to this point, and obviously all those games have mattered, and we're very, very important up to this point. But nonetheless, we're sitting at February 9th, and essentially we have a three-way tie, right? Technically, Purdue's a half game ahead, but in terms of the loss column, a three-way tie at the top of this, and the schedule really ratchets up for the 3 teams sitting at the top of the standings right now. So to me, the Big Ten race kind of starts in earnest on Tuesday. Purdue kind of gets some heat right away, and obviously Michigan State and Michigan's schedule ratchets up even more as we get closer to the end of the season. But let's just take a look at the standings real quick and kind of talk through that. So nobody make fun of my graphics, okay? I threw these together really quickly. I am not a graphic designer, but wanted to have something that we could pull up and show you. I did this the exact width, Joe, so that you could still see both of our faces.
Nice.
I did not at all.
Can I
But
can
go
I
ahead.
call something out? You've
Daggone it, what
Michigan
did I
State
do?
twice.
Oh,
One
okay.
of them's Michigan.
One of them's Michigan. My bad. That's like it does the autofill on the words, so
I
that's my fault.
totally get it. I do totally get it.
I wish I would have caught that before this, but nonetheless, you got Purdue, Michigan State, and Michigan all at the top there. Purdue has played one more game than those two, so sitting 11-2, a half game ahead, and then you have Michigan State, and Michigan both sitting at 10-2, a half game behind. 2 teams with floor losses in UCLA and Wisconsin at 9-4, 2 games behind Purdue currently, and then as you mentioned, Maryland at 7-5. I guess as we're just looking at this, Joe, high level, big picture, before we kind of get more into the conversation of looking at schedules and how many losses teams may have as we approach the end of the year, to win the Big Ten outright, where the standings are sitting currently. So most of these teams either have 7 or 8 games left. Michigan and Michigan State both have 8 games left, and the other 3 really in contention all have 7 games left. How many losses do you think a team can have and still win the Big Ten outright this year?
I think 4 wins it outright. I would 3, like, no doubts wins it outright. 4, I would be like 95% confident wins it outright. I do think 5 losses, like, I think if you're a team sitting at 5 losses, your hope is to win out and just have people lose, because I think 5 would not have a sole outright winner. I think that only comes with 3 or 4 losses, or I guess 2,
Yeah,
but that's not happening.
and I'm with you. I'm with you 100%. So I think 4 games wins the league outright. Like I said, lots of big matchups for the 3 teams at the top end of this bracket left. So I do think 16-4 record probably wins it outright this year. 15-5, I think that means you have 2, maybe 3 in a crazy situation, maybe even 4 teams that are splitting a Big Ten title here. And I've got a little bit of a sleeper. I think you just woke up before we did these shows, or not too long ago. So I don't know how much you were scrolling Twitter, but I mentioned it this morning. To me, there's a little bit of a sleeper if this does end up a 2 or a 3-way tie, just because of what their schedule looks like the rest of the year and how they've been playing lately, that might be able to slide in there. Before we jump into these 5 teams at the top that have legitimate chances, we think, to still get a piece, at least, of the Big Ten title, let's maybe look at the bottom end real quick, because only 15 teams are going to make the Big Ten tournament this team. If we look down there, right, Penn State's sitting at 3-10 in last place right now. Washington's just a half game in front, having played 1 game less at 3-9. Then you've got Minnesota at 4-9, Northwestern 4-9, Iowa 4-8, Oregon and Indiana at 5-8. We didn't really dive into the bottom end teams' schedules. So as we talk about this, I guess if somebody jumps in and is like, whoa, like Iowa's schedule is absolutely ridiculous down the stretch or whatever, just know that we haven't really dove into that a ton. But I guess as you look at this, what are your 3 teams that you think are most likely to miss the Big Ten tournament right now?
Penn State's, which is, I mean, I at one point was pretty convinced they were a top 6 team in the Big Ten. Catch teams at the wrong time, and you lose an early game, and it's now an awful loss. Not awful in terms of metrics, I guess, but regardless, Penn State is probably the one I'm most confident in. And then I don't think Oregon or Indiana drop. So I think the final 2 is between Iowa, Northwestern, Minnesota, and Washington. I'm gonna.
Is between who? Say that again. Did you say Oregon?
Iowa, Northwestern, Minnesota, and Washington.
Okay, I thought you threw Oregon in there for a second. My bad. Go ahead.
No. I was saying our Oregon and IU won't. I don't think. Although IU's schedule is crazy tough, but right. I think if you get to 6 wins, you probably make it. I wouldn't expect 16th place to have 6 wins at this point. So give me Penn State, give me Minnesota, and see, Washington's schedule is just so easy relative. But give me Washington. I'll take the bottom 3. I think Northwestern and Iowa have enough talent to get out a couple wins. And they also, Northwestern has a really, not like crazy easy, but like a fairly easy schedule. I don't think Iowa has a too tough of a schedule either. So I'll go the bottom 3 and just kind of give the cop-out answer.
So I'm actually going to go Penn State, Washington, and Northwestern. I feel like Minnesota's playing better ball. I feel like Northwestern's reeling a little bit from that loss of Barnheiser and at times really struggles to score. Again, I have not dove into the schedules here. But I just, that's kind of where I feel directionally some of the teams are headed right now. I'm a little bit more confident in the way Minnesota's playing ball. I will say though, IU finishes at Michigan State versus UCLA versus Purdue. They do get Penn State at home, and then they have to make their West Coast trip 2 of the last 3 games, which has not been easy for everyone. We just saw, right, Northwestern just lost to Washington last night. Is that right?
Yeah.
I fell asleep before that game was over, so it's pretty sure that they catch Oregon at Oregon, who's reeling and really needs to knock off some wins, and then they have to come home and play Ohio State after they make that road trip, who has looked much better of late. So I think IU makes it still, but like if there was a team to really fall that we didn't think was there right now, that might be my pick, just also because of everything that's going on there. And like, how do they handle that situation and everything else as it goes there?
Yeah, I'm with you there. Like things could go off the wheels really quickly. If we're talking about like deep sleeper, like no, I'm looking at their schedule and it's not too tough. Like there is just the random chance Rutgers doesn't. Now Rutgers can also easily go on a heater and like make the tourney, but when you rely on 2 players to win you every single game, now they are phenomenal players. Like there's just the chance that things go poorly and they rattle off 5 losses and they're in this weird spot. I don't expect that to happen whatsoever. But I'm just saying, if there's like another really deep sleeper we're talking about, it's like, I guess I would say them, but I do think it comes from the bottom 5 listed in the standings here. Like I think 3 of those teams do it. They also, I think, like we talked about, right, the top ends, they play each other a lot. It also means that these bottom teams play each other a good bit. That's kind of the rest of the way. Penn State has Washington, Minnesota, and IU still. Like Washington still has Penn State, still has Rutgers, Iowa, USC. Like there's still some games down at the bottom too that are like, hey, these teams match up. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. I'm a fan. Like I like that not every team makes it. I don't know if that's I think it's a hot take based on what I've seen from Twitter, but I love it because it actually gives meaning to some of these games.
Yeah, for sure. That normally won it. So it's going to be exciting to see how that breaks out. Let's dive into the top 5 here a little bit in terms of looking at their schedules. So This time we cannot see our faces, so I clearly didn't make the graphic on purpose that way the first time, or I would have done it again this way. So we're looking at Purdue's schedule. I'll kind of roll through this real quick, Joe, and then we can talk about it and pull it back up if we need to. So obviously start with Michigan away on Tuesday, who's currently 19th in KenPom and ranked 24th in the AP poll. Then we catch Wisconsin at home next Friday. Important note that Wisconsin has a full week off before they come to play us in Mackey February 15th, currently sitting at 13th in KenPom and 21st in the AP poll. Then we go away to Michigan State. So our next three, if you're Purdue fans, is certainly stacked. Who's sitting 9th right now in the AP poll, 17th in KenPom. Obviously, they're going to drop in the AP poll after picking up another loss, but that's where they sit currently. Then we go to Indiana away, who gave Purdue everything that they could at home. So you never know how that's going to go. UCLA at home, who I know, Joe, and I'm interested to see if you still think this was one of your picks for teams that could really get into Purdue and cause problems and pressure them at the beginning of the season. Then Rutgers at home, who's looked better since Harper has kind of fully gotten healthy again. And then we finished with Illinois away, who was ranked 23rd in the AP poll and 15th in KenPom. So just looking through that schedule, Joe, obviously there's a lot of stacked teams in that group, but where do you see Purdue maybe picking up wins? If there's any games that you think are like, man, that's probably an L, or games that are at least you think will give Purdue a lot of trouble.
I really honestly think for the rest of the way, there is no game where I look and I'm like, oh, that's a guaranteed L. I also don't know if I look and say that is absolutely 100% a win. I think you can point to at Indiana and home versus Rutgers is like, you have those are must wins in terms of just like winning the Big Ten title. You got to win those probably. But we saw it in Mackey. IU gave Purdue issues. Like Dylan Harper and Ace Bailey can randomly go for 55 points. And like, can you win that game still? Now it's in Mackey. But right, like at Michigan State, at Illinois, all very tough games. Per KenPom not favored in any of them, although they're all 1-point games for a reason. But I also don't think like stylistically it's like, oh yeah, that's just a terrible, terrible matchup for Purdue. Honestly, depending on how Wisconsin plays, like Wisconsin could in theory give Purdue issues. And I think if there's a home game I'm worried about, I think the home games are like none of them are easy to me. Right. UCLA is tough. Wisconsin, I think, is also good. And like how they can score the ball can be tough. So I don't know if I have specifics win losses, but I do think to win the Big Ten title, you want to go 2-1 over this next 3-game stretch, where right you have some two tough road games and a tough home game. I think if you can go 2-1 there, that allows you to go 3-1 over the last 4. And I do think they probably just drop one in that last 4, and that's still going to get you a Big Ten title at 16-4.
So your prediction is that Purdue goes 5-2 then?
Yeah. I couldn't tell you which games, but I think 2 losses.
I'm with you. I'm 100% with you there. I am very excited that we get Wisconsin and UCLA at home because I'm with you on Wisconsin. I think being a tough matchup for this Purdue team, so I'm excited we get them in Mackey. And I'm excited we get UCLA in Mackey because of the way that they can pressure the ball defensively. And honestly, right. So Purdue had a seasonal transformation, right? Somewhere in the season. Cronin came out and challenged his guys, and everybody kind of made fun of him at the time for the way that he went about it. But UCLA responded. I think the emergence and development of the 7-foot freshman and the fact that he's playing better and playing more minutes has been really important for that team as well. So let's jump to, I guess, the team that was leading the Big Ten standings for a really long time here in Michigan State. Michigan State catches Indiana at home on Tuesday, who's currently 55th in KenPom. And then they go away to Illinois, sitting at 15th in KenPom, 23rd in the AP poll. Then they get Purdue at home, who's ranked 7th in both. Then they go to Michigan, who's 24th in the AP poll, 19th in KenPom. Then they go to Maryland, who's 18th in both. Then they catch Wisconsin at home, who's 13th in KenPom, 21st in the AP poll. They get to go to Iowa, but it's away, where Iowa can be dangerous and put up a lot of points. And then they finish out facing Michigan at home again. as we look at this stretch, right? To me, it wasn't just that Michigan State wasn't playing the top end teams earlier. It was that they really weren't even catching some of the better, maybe KenPom teams that weren't in terms of metrics, that weren't at the very top end of the Big Ten schedule. And they go on the road and they lose at USC. They lose at UCLA, have a really tough time with Oregon. Obviously, they pulled away and end up winning, I think, by double digits in that game at the end. 20-point swing in that game from at halftime through the end of that game. As you're looking at this schedule, Joe, I guess just what are your thoughts? Because that is a murderer's row right there.
Initial thought is home against Indiana, like that is actually a must win. Michigan State cannot afford to lose that game in any sense of the scenario. Izzo would break Bob Knight's record against Indiana for most Big Ten wins. Indiana's reeling. Michigan State, obviously, you look at the rest of their schedule, like that is by far their easiest game. At Iowa is very winnable, but like you said, what happens? There's just the chance Dix and Sanford go for 40 combines. Like that's not out of the realm of possibilities. And then the rest are just really tough games against what? 2, 3, 4, probably 6 of the top 8 teams in the Big Ten. I would say that pretty comfortably, I think, for me. With a few of them on the road, it's tough. Like I wouldn't be shocked if they go 500 in this stretch. And I still think Michigan State is a good team. But you're seeing some turnover issues creep up, and they're a team that has to value possessions. They cancel it some with rebounding, but it's tough to look at how this Michigan State team has played and then look at them and see this upcoming schedule and be very confident that they win enough games to win the Big Ten title. I don't think they can win it outright realistically unless they go crazy. I think for them, it's probably their realistic best case scenario to me is you go 5-3, you're at 15-5, and then you just happen to kind of stumble into getting a tie. Now, maybe you beat Purdue, right? You get the home win against Purdue is probably the most important of just like, you can get that win. You get Michigan at home. If you can get those two, you're in a decent spot. But it's going to be tough.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say 500 to me because as I go through that schedule, that's where I have them. But before the show, I went through each one of these schedules. I had them at 4-4 in that 8-game stretch. If you were going to predict, Joe, 4-4 or 5-3, where are you landing?
Win L 4-4.
Okay, so we both have them the same. So that would put Michigan State at 14-6 at the end of the year. Let's jump to the other team who's sitting there with 2 losses in Michigan. They obviously get Purdue at home on Tuesday, sitting ranked 7th in the AP poll. Then they have to go away to an Ohio State team that has been playing a lot better basketball of late, catch Michigan State at home. Then they go to Nebraska. We know how good Nebraska is at home historically. Maybe not quite as good of a home record this year, but typically has been that way. They've given a little bit of a reemergence here lately as well. Then you catch Rutgers at home, Illinois at home, Maryland at home, and then Michigan State away to finish the season. Thoughts on Michigan's schedule, Joe?
I don't think it's the worst. I think it's better than Michigan State's for sure. You get 5 of these games at home, which is big. 2 of your road games are against bubble teams in Ohio State and Nebraska, which can be good, can be bad. Right? Those teams are kind of fighting for their turning line. They're on the right side of the bubble, to give credit to them. But a win against Michigan would more or less not secure them a spot, but push them towards that direction. But also a lot of tough games. Purdue, Michigan State, Illinois, Maryland, Michigan State again. I don't think, right, I said, I don't think it's as tough as Michigan State's, but it's still not an easy schedule. I do kind of just looking through, I think they go 5-3 in this stretch. I could see them, I think they pick off at least one of Ohio State or Nebraska and then maybe drop one of the home games. And then that's how you kind of get to 15-3, or what's that? 5-3 over the stretch.
5-3, right? Which would put them at 15-5 on the season. Man, we are just running. We did not talk before the show at all about our predictions, but we are running lockstep right now with the records that we figure on the rest of the way out. And it's important too to just like that extra game matters because we've seen Big Ten teams, whether it's Purdue against Ohio State, Purdue against Penn State, Michigan State to USC, or Michigan to Minnesota, right? That games that you do not expect at all. To be losses for some of these teams creep up and do that. So just having that one extra game is important. I'm going to go to my sleeper team next, and then we'll finish with Wisconsin here, Joe. I think UCLA quietly could sneak up if it's a 15-5 situation where you have multiple teams splitting this. I think UCLA sneakily could get to that spot and end up sharing a piece of the Big Ten title. They sit with only 7 games left. They get Illinois away, which is going to be a tough task. They get Indiana away, which to me is a win. They get Minnesota at home, Ohio State at home. Purdue away is going to be a really tough task for them with most of those guys being their first time in Mackey ever. Northwestern away, USC at home.
Right, for anybody that follows me knows there maybe has not been a bigger UCLA fan outside of the state of California than me all year, right? Just what you're starting to, these last few games especially, is like kind of what I envisioned, where you have enough shot making, the defense is really tough, can turn teams over. The only concern that I have in terms of competing for the Big Ten titles, they're already at 4 losses. They still have 4 road games. They have not won a single game this entire year outside of the Pacific time zone. Do I expect them to go 0-4 on the road? Probably not. But I think like a successful out of those 4 road games would be 2-2. And so that's my only hesitation. But like talent, I think they're going to be a team that doesn't win the Big Ten title. Probably they'll be, I think, a game or 2 out. But they're going to be a team that can maybe get hot in the Big Ten tourney. And I also think they'll be a team that's like going to be more of a sleeper team come March of like, oh, hey, this UCLA team, like, they've won at that point probably like 12 of their last 15 games or something like that, and like can go on a run. That's kind of where I have the take with them. If they just didn't jump off of a cliff like into start January, then I'd feel a lot more confident. I mean, they were my preseason pick. It just that 4-game stretch was brutal.
So they've got 4 losses right now. They've got 7 games left. Joe, give me their record for the next 7 games.
3. I will go 5-2.
Joe,
I don't.
You got to quit this. You got to quit this, Joe.
I kind of want to go 4-3. I'll stick 5-2. I trust them. I believe in UCLA. I got to stick it out with them.
All right. So you and me both have them finishing 14-6. I think they're an outside sleeper. I don't think they will do it and get to only 5 losses at the end of the year. But I think there's a chance. There's an outside chance that they might slide up there. I think they have a much better chance to do so than Wisconsin, sitting at 4 losses, because Wisconsin has to go to Purdue away next Friday, face the number 7 team in the country. We might actually climb up in the AP poll. I'm not sure. I haven't looked at the teams ahead of Purdue this week to see what they've done. And then they get Illinois at home. Going to be a tough game. They get Oregon at home, Washington at home. The one thing they do have working for them is they get those 3 home games right in a row after they play Purdue away. Then they get Michigan State away, Minnesota away, and Penn State at home. So in terms of totality, I guess maybe of the teams, maybe it's not as tough as the top 3 teams schedule, but there's 3 big time teams on that schedule still. And if you're looking at it saying we probably can only lose 1 more game to still get a piece of the Big Ten title, I just think that's probably a little tougher ask than maybe what UCLA's facing the rest of the season. We're going to preview Wisconsin later this week. I think my son's hopping on to help us talk a little bit about Wisconsin, who's a big Wisconsin basketball fan because he lives in that state. I'm really high on him. I absolutely love Blackwell and obviously what Tanjay's been able to do. Where do you see this team finishing out in terms of their schedule? Do they have enough? They haven't really beat a top end team in the Big Ten yet. Do they have enough firepower against Purdue, Illinois, Michigan State?
And that, I mean, you said it. That is the main concern. The best win that they really had, they beat Arizona early in non-con in a really weird game. Their best win besides that is home against Ohio State, in which they blew a 17-point lead, I guess. They beat Nebraska. They beat the brakes off Nebraska at home too, I guess. They're a team that, right, they have one win over a surefire tourney team the entire year, and then they have 3 wins against bubble teams, and then they beat up on bad teams. I want to believe in them more. Like, there's kind of going through the, like, I could see a scenario where they go 6-1 and get to 5 losses. It's just, do I trust them to pick off 2 of Purdue, Illinois, Michigan State? And I don't know if I necessarily do. I think they're going to be a team that finishes 14-6, probably 2 losses. Right, because I think they can beat Oregon, Washington, Minnesota, Penn State. They're designed to beat those teams. And, like, I think they're good enough to get one of Purdue, Illinois, Michigan State. I don't know which one. Illinois at home is probably the best bet, but just don't. I don't know. It's right. I think talent-wise, they're every bit as good. It's just at some point you do have to, like, beat a good team. Like, you've lost to Michigan, Marquette, Illinois, UCLA, and Maryland. None of those are bad losses by any means. You're also 1-6 against teams that are going to make the tournament for sure.
Okay, so you're going you calling them 5-2 the rest of the way?
Yeah.
Okay, so that puts them at 14-6. This is the first one we didn't agree on, Joe. I actually went 4-3 on this group, or into stretch run for Wisconsin, which would put them at 13-7. I think they might catch one of those 3. I think they might lose a game in there that maybe doesn't jump off the page as well. So I've got Wisconsin finishing 13-7. So in review, Joe, we once again, unsurprisingly, since we're a Purdue podcast, but we try to look objectively, and Joe more so than me even, especially we have Purdue winning the Big Ten outright again at 16-4, finishing the 7-game stretch at 5-2. Looks like we both have Michigan at 15-5, which would put them in sole possession of second place, and then Michigan State and UCLA for you and Wisconsin all finishing at 14-6. I have Wisconsin at 13-7. So that's how we see it breaking out. Is there any chance that Illinois, how many losses does Illinois have? 7?
That's a good 6.
They have 6. Okay. Any chance they close out this stretch run undefeated and end up sitting in like a second, tied for second or tied for third place in the Big Ten?
Home against UCLA, home against Michigan State, at Wisconsin, neutral against Duke, which obviously doesn't count for that. Home against Iowa, at Michigan, home against Purdue. Like, I assume they get 2 losses minimum, with not including Duke.
Yep, I'm with you.
And then Maryland's right, the other team, and I'm going to check. We're recording during the midst of Maryland Rutgers. They're up 12 with 2 minutes left in the first half with Kevin Willard. That doesn't necessarily guarantee a win. I think they're a sneaky like, if everything broke for them, they're a sneaky team to get a share, but like everything has to break right and they have to play perfect. Home against Rutgers, at Nebraska, home against Iowa, home against USC, home against Michigan State, at Penn State, at Michigan, home against Northwestern. So Michigan State and Michigan are the 2, Michigan State, Michigan, and at Nebraska are the 3, I guess, very tough games in that stretch. You get a bunch of home games. You only play 2 to 3 tourney teams. Like, I'm not predicting them to do it. I still think they probably end up with 2 losses in there. But until that loss happens, they're at least going to be lurking. And with their schedule, I think they have a much easier schedule than any of the 5 we like in-depth went through. Again, don't think it happens, but they're a team that I'm not officially counting out until they actually lose a game, which could be this week, but could be today. But I'm not going to count them out till then.
Last question related to Big Ten here. Ohio State, USC, Nebraska, I guess Oregon, because they're on such a slide. Ohio State, USC, Nebraska, Oregon. Who makes the big dance and who doesn't?
Oregon does. Oregon does for sure. I think Ohio State gets there because they have an easier schedule to stretch. USC and who's the other?
Nebraska.
I don't like it. I don't even trust Ohio State to make it, truthfully.
Uh-huh.
If I was to guess between USC and Nebraska, I'll go Nebraska. But I'm not crazy confident in either of those teams, truthfully.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I think I do think maybe not. I think USC still has a chance to make it just based off their schedule without having to do anything crazy necessarily in the Big Ten tournament in terms of like actually winning the Big Ten tournament. Some other guys that follow bracketology a lot more than me said it was kind of questionable, but they were. I saw in bracket matrix that they were listed in a handful of brackets right now for where they sit. Nebraska, I think, is in based on bracket matrix the last time that I checked. So going to be really interesting to see how all this shakes out as the Big Ten season wraps up. You heard it from Joe. Purdue is winning the Big Ten again outright. Okay, I agreed. I agreed with Joe as well.
Yeah, and I was not expecting that in December, but I do like if we're talking about like tiers and not even just caring about standings, but just caring about who is the best team. Like I think Purdue's a clear-cut one at this point. Like I'm not quite. They're in like a half tier of their own to me. Like I trust them way more than. I don't even know what I would want to order. Michigan State, Michigan, Maryland, UCLA, Wisconsin. I'm still going to throw Illinois in there, although I know they probably don't deserve to be. I don't know how I would order them, but I am at this point like, and I'm confident that Purdue right now I would rank them just like a half tier above everybody else, and I think a lot of it is just like Purdue at this point has proven they can beat good teams. They beat Michigan. They have a couple good non-con wins, which some of the other teams don't, and that Michigan State really doesn't. Wisconsin has one. Like, right, I think Purdue is a better non-con even with their losses. But I think at this point, Purdue has shown they can win more ways than any other team. You want to get into a shootout, Purdue can put up the points. You want to turn it into an ISO game, Brainsmith and TKR can go to work. You want to turn it into a grimy, gritty defensive game, Purdue can do it, and like they did against Oregon. And that's why I think they're kind of just in the tier of their own to me right now.
Agree. Agree 100%. If you're watching this, if this popped up in your feed or your timeline first, we did earlier today record a short preview, not near as long as normal because it's a repeat game against Michigan. Check that out as well. We will see you guys February 11th, a little bit after the Michigan-Purdue game that tips off at 7 p.m. on Peacock.